UFC Fight Night Sao Paulo, Almeida versus Lewis takes place this weekend, and I'm going to go through the entire card, starting with the early prelims, ending with the main event, giving my prediction and breakdown for every single fight on the card, starting with the early prelim opener of Kaue Fernandes versus Marc Diakiese. Now, Kaue Fernandes is actually a pretty good fighter on the regional scene, coming off 2 finishes back-to-back. Pretty impressive finishes as well, one with a body kick and one with a head kick. He's a decent fighter, pretty good, but Marc Diakiese in your debut is really tough to get by, in my opinion. He can grapple, he can strike with the likes of Fiziev, and not beat Fiziev on the feet. I get it, he lost the first 2 rounds, but still be there in the 3rd round and arguably take the 3rd round off of Rafael Fiziev. So I'm going to go with Marc Diakiese, mainly because although Kaue Fernandes, however you say his name, Kaue Fernandes, although he's good and he does have finishing potential and he does have some really dynamic moves, I watched this fight where he lost and he absolutely gassed after the 1st round after any sign of adversity that he got. As soon as he couldn't get his own way in the 2nd round, he immediately started gassing. And I'm going to go with Marc Diakiese because he's a hard guy to get out of there in the 1st round. You've got to be really quite good to get him out of there in the 1st round. Marc Diakiese only lost to Joel Alvarez kind of because of a head clash that went unnoticed by the referee, and then Joel Alvarez ended up latching up the submission. I'm going to end up going with Marc Diakiese here, just because I think if it does get out of that 1st round, he's going to give Fernandes some problems. So I'm going to go with Marc Diakiese via a 3rd round TKO or finish by submission, by resorting to his grappling in the 2nd and 3rd round to start getting some momentum back after maybe a bad 1st. We move on. Up the card, Eduarda Moura versus Montserrat Ruiz. As long as Eduarda Moura can stop a head and arm throw, she should win this fight pretty convincingly. She's actually very good. Looked really good on the Contender Series as well. And I think there is a grappling difference between the two of them. I do think Eduarda Moura has the advantage on the feet as well. So I'm going to go with her based on that. But it's mainly the grappling that I think she's going to get the better of. We've seen Montserrat Ruiz out-grappled. Not by any schmucks, by the way. I mean, the only losses she's had is Jacqueline Amorim and Amanda Lemos. But Jacqueline Amorim was able to get takedown on her and, you know, do her thing on top. Get some ground and pound off and stuff like that. So, I'm going to go with Eduarda Moura. The takedown that she went for on the Contender Series just looked like a takedown of someone who knew what they were doing. The entry that she had on it, the way she shot in for the legs. I'm going to go with Eduarda Moura. I think she's a way more skilled opponent. 9-0 versus 10-3. She's got a physicality advantage as well. Montserrat Ruiz, very, very small for the strawweight division. Eduarda Moura going to be a lot taller. Got a 6-inch reach advantage here as well. Montserrat Ruiz has a 61-inch reach, which is absolutely crazy. How little it is. And Eduarda Moura, I reckon, is going to get this one done. We move on. Up the card, Angela Hill versus Denise Gomes. All I'm going to say is this. This ain't Angela Hill's first tussle with a man-woman, okay? She's beaten some butch women before in her career with some really impressive performances. I thought her performance against Amanda Lemos was very impressive. Now, I know Zhang Weili just dominated Amanda Lemos. I get it, but Lemos is very dangerous. Very, very dangerous. Heavy power puncher. And nobody finishes Angela Hill. And you know who beat Denise Gomes? Loma Lookboom. You know who beat Loma Lookboom flying across the world on short notice? On a week's notice, I believe it was in Australia. Angela Hill. So it's not just like MMA math. Well, she beat this one and the other one beat this one. No. She's gone across the world on short notice to fight Loma Lookboom at the time that she took her on. And still beat her. You know what I mean? That was her stepping up to save that event, because I believe that Loma Lookboom was supposed to be taking on, I'm going to find it out right now. She was supposed to be taking on, where's her loss to Angela Hill? She was supposed to take on Hannah Goldie. So a bit of a jump up for her on short notice, I understand. But still, I like Angela Hill's composure. Don't leave her chin up in the air. Very hard to finish. And I think if Denise Gomes doesn't get that finish, things could come undone pretty quickly for her. And I think Angela Hill's going to start to pull ahead in those later rounds. So I'm going to go 29-28. Very close decision. Angela Hill gets it done. And she's an underdog. And I think I'm going to take those odds. We move on. Up the card. Vitor Petrino versus Modestas Bukauskas. I'm going with another underdog here. I'm going with Modestas Bukauskas over Vitor Petrino. I liked his performance against Marcin Prachnio. You know, he ended up on top and got the arm triangle and good stuff. Finishing Marcin Prachnio is not a difficult, not an easy thing to do. Marcin Prachnio is very difficult. Was able to frustrate Khalil Roundtree to a decision loss. And a decision win for Prachnio, that is. A loss for Khalil Roundtree, which is very impressive. But, you know, Vitor Petrino has the grappling. I think Modestas Bukauskas is very underrated in the middleweight, in the light heavyweight division, sorry. Very underrated. He's going to have a bit of a reach advantage over Petrino here, which I don't think Petrino's really going to be used to. He's got a massive experience advantage as well. He's already had his chance in the UFC, lost it with a brutal injury, worked his way back in, and now he's back on a 2-fight win streak. I know against Zach Pauga, he didn't look the best, but Pauga was just holding him, and Pauga's a former heavyweight as well, and he was trying to hold him up against a cage. I don't see Vitor Petrino holding him up against a cage. I think there's going to be a lot more stand-up here. And Modestas' performance against Tyson Pedro, who is nasty if you're no good at light heavyweight, his performance against Tyson Pedro on short notice was a very impressive performance. Again, he flew across the world to Australia on a week's notice when he wasn't even in the UFC again before he took that fight, stepped in from the regional scene and beat Pedro. Pedro's all right and dangerous, and if you're no good, he beats you. Such as Anton Turkalj, who's no good, who gave Vitor Petrino really a tough fight, and they both looked a little bit sloppy in that one. I think Modestas is a lot better. I think he's got more experience, and he got flat out robbed against Mikhail Alekseychuk. I know Mikhail Alekseychuk was going forward in that fight and pushing the pace, but Modestas should have arguably won that fight against Mikhail Alekseychuk, and Alekseychuk is a dangerous power fighter on the feet, and I think he would beat Vitor Petrino. So I'm going to go with Modestas Bukauskas getting this one done as an underdog. I like his odds there. We move on. Up the card, Victor Hugo versus Daniel Marcos. I'm going to go Victor Hugo over Daniel Marcos. I'm dipping into some underdogs here. I'm not in a state of delusion after watching Ngannou arguably beat Fury in a boxing match. I'm just going with underdogs. When I believe they're an underdog and I think they're going to win, I'm going to pick them. Like, I don't do this all the time, but when I see him, I see him. I know Daniel Marcos beat Davy Grant from what I saw as a bit of a bad decision. Let's just call it. He didn't really do much in that fight. You know what I mean? A lot of the low kicks that he went for were checked. He was landing glancing shots here and there. He didn't really do much to win. It's just that, like, none of them even really did anything, but Davy Grant did a little bit more. I know Davy Grant's really good, and this might backfire because, you know, you see Davy Grant, and he's really, really good at bantamweight, and Daniel Marcos beat him, so therefore, I think Victor Hugo is really underrated. 24, I know 15-0 Daniel Marcos, completely understand. Victor Hugo, 24-4. I've been looking through his resume. He's got good submission ability, really good leg attacks on the ground as well, that he may end up going for here. And when it comes to Daniel Marcos' performances so far, he didn't beat Davy Grant, in my opinion. He got outstruck 70-48 and won somehow. In the UK as well. What are they doing, UK judges? Let's have some Fury home cooking, you know what I'm saying? Some Saudi Arabian business. How about that? Simon Oliveira was desperately going for takedowns against Daniel Marcos on his debut, failing them, and then gassing out and turning his back against the cage over and over again. No wonder Daniel Marcos beat him. I think Victor Hugo, very composed, very underrated as a fighter, and something I want to point out about him as well. Normally we see these prospects in MMA. They started around this time or they started around that time. And I really think Daniel Marcos is an underrated regional veteran of the game, is what I'm going to call him. Underrated regional veteran. I'm speaking about Daniel Marcos. Victor Hugo. Daniel Marcos 15-0. Victor Hugo 24-4. Hasn't lost since 2014. Started his pro career in 2011, by the way. 2011. He's 30. He's in his prime. He's got the reach. Dangerous on the feet. Was on a massive finishing streak coming into the UFC. I think he's going to do quite well. I think he's going to do quite well here. And I do think he's going to pull off the win in an upset against Daniel Marcos. I'm going with Victor Hugo. He's had a lot of people try and take him down. He's a striker. His nickname is The Striker. I think he's going to have a good time on the feet with Daniel Marcos. And I'm picking him as an underdog. We move on. Up the card. Rinat, and he's been active. Fought a month ago. Rinat Fakhretdinov versus Elizeu. And he beat an amazing opponent on the Contender Series. What was his opponent's record on the Contender Series again? Let me go back to it. I think he beat someone who was like 16-1 on the Contender Series, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, 16-1, Eduarda Mateus Torres Cole. I reckon he's going to win this one, so I'm going with Victor Hugo getting this one done. We move on up the card to another fight, which is Rinat Fakhretdinov versus Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos. Rinat Fakhretdinov, 21-1, monster, got the beard, got the OV at the end of his name. Got to just start picking these guys now, I feel like, right? Got to just start picking them. So I'm going to go Rinat Fakhretdinov. Love Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos. Think he's a very underrated fighter. You wouldn't believe some of the wins that he has on his record. I mean, he has wins over Muslim Salikov, who also ends in an OV. Li Jingliang. No, he lost his fight, sorry. He has wins over Benoit Saint Denis, but that was Benoit moving up a weight class on short notice in his debut. He has a win over 20-1 Alexei Kunchenko, who was quite a good prospect, who took Burns to a close decision when he was coming up in the welterweight division as well. He beat Sean Strickland with a wheel kick. Omari Akhmedov, Max Griffin. These are good names at welterweight, and Akhmedov was a decent name at middleweight and gave Vittori a really tough fight on his come up. So I'm not counting out Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos, but he's getting old. You know, and he is coming off a decent win over Abubakar Nurmagomedov, but I think Abubakar Nurmagomedov is the shame of the cliff. You know what I mean? They all poke fun at him and laugh at him. Oh, you don't want it? That's like that guy they tell you not to end up as on the cliff. Don't go down this road, brother. You end up like Abubakar. You know what I mean? You don't want to end up like him on that. He's the laughing stock of the cliff, I think. So Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos, as good as he is, Brian Battle's really good. And Rinat made pretty dominant, easy work of him, dropping him on the feet, dominating him on the ground to a decision win. Beat Andreas Michailidis as well, pretty easily as well. Out-grappled him. I think that was Kevin Lee. Took him on, submitted him in the first round after dropping him on the feet. It looks like his hands are starting to get there. Before he was a bit more of a grappler with some stand-up skill, but now he's being a bit more confident in the UFC with his hands. And I think that mixture is going to be difficult for Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos to deal with in his old age after such a long career. So I'm going to go for Rinat Fakhretdinov. Would be crazy if Elizeu pulls it off with a wheel kick or a jump knee or something, but Rinat's going to get it done. I don't think the threat of the takedown is going to work too well with the wild, dynamic style of Elizeu. So, yeah, I'm going to go with Rinat Fakhretdinov getting this one done. I do think Elizeu's quite a decent underdog, but Rinat is just undeniable, I think, at this point. We're going to move on. Esteban Ribovic versus... what's his name? It's not on the UFC schedule because it says cancelled, but I haven't seen anything about it being cancelled. Esteban Ribovic versus Elves Brenner. I'm just going to do a quick sum up. I didn't like Esteban Ribovic's performance against Loic Radzhabov. I don't think Loic is all that great. Even his performance against Camuela Kirk, who I think is a very simple style of opponent. Esteban was able to take him to a decision, and it got sloppy here and there. But he did win the fight. Don't get me wrong. He won the fight. And he had his knockdowns and his moments where he hurt him. But Elves Brenner... absolute savage. Coming off a win over Garam Kutsteledze. Zubaira Tukagov as well. Had some tough goes on the regional scene. Fought some good opponents on the regional scene. Gabriel Santos is no joke. I thought he was going to beat Onama in his debut. He looked great against Lerone Murphy. Took him to a split decision in his debut. Yeah, I'm going to go with Elves Brenner. After that performance against Garam, If that fight is still on, I think he's going to win it by TKO in the later rounds. We move on. Up the card. Ismael Bonfim versus Vince Piquel. This one's a little bit unfair of a matchup, in my opinion. I don't know why the UFC does this. Actually, I do know. It's the same reason they gave Terrence McKinney Mike Breeden, who now ended up being a monster, but got cut from the UFC anyway for beating their little star boy, Anshul Jabli. But yeah, Ismael Bonfim. he ran into Benoit Saint Denis. And we didn't know it yet, but now we know it, that Benoit is going to be a force to be reckoned with at lightweight. And he ended up breaking his arm in that fight because he got kicked to the body and blocked it and hurt his forearm. And then Benoit took him down and choked him out. Very impressive performance by Benoit Saint Denis. But I am going to go with Ishmael Bonfim. Great performance against Terence McKinney and the composure that he had. I don't see Vince Pichel having the body kicks enough to break this guy's arm, impair him in any way. Vince Pichel's good, had some decent wins. Jim Miller is a decent win at any time in your career at lightweight. But I think Vince Pichel's now 40 years of age. I think it's about time. Anyone who loses to Marc Madsen is trash, in my honest opinion. Marc Madsen is awful at fighting, can't fight, and I reckon Ishmael Bonfim's going to give him some real trouble on the feet, and I think he's going to get a wicked first round TKO. We move on. Up the card, Rodolfo Vieira versus Armen Petrosian. I'm going to go Armen Petrosian. Closer to his prime. I know Rodolfo Vieira is a very difficult test, but I think Armen's got solid takedown defense, great composure on the ground as well. I think Borralho has much better entries than Rodolfo Vieira, even if he doesn't have the same jiu-jitsu. And Borralho did struggle in that fight with Armen Petrosian, where Armen, arguably on damage, could have won, even though Borralho did have dominant position over him for a majority of that fight. On damage, Petrosian landed nearly triple the significant strikes in that fight. That was a really close one, and he did more total strikes of like punches on the ground as well. So if you want to get nitty-gritty with the damage, that fight can be Armen Petrosian's. I thought that was an impressive performance. And Borralho's entries are way more athletic and impressive than Rodolfo Vieira, who has that jiu-jitsu problem where sometimes he just can't seem to get people to the ground. I'm going to go with Armen Petrosian here. I think he'll be able to shut down the takedowns. And if he does, I think he can stay composed across the distance of the fight to get himself a decision win in the third and second, maybe after a tough first round. I just don't like the cardio of Vieira against Armen Petrosian. Petrosian coming off a big win against Christian Leroy Duncan. Outstruck him very comfortably on the feet. Beat Gregory Rodriguez very comfortably. Had some moments where he was in trouble, don't get me wrong, but 127-61 on significant strikes. He knows how to keep up the points on the feet of damage, and I love his low kicks as well. So I think if he keeps going to the calf here on Rodolfo, one, he has the takedowns to stop it, and he's going to impair Rodolfo's ability to push and grind in those takedowns. And Rodolfo Vieira's wins, at the end of the day, are weak sauce. Weak sauce at middleweight. Cody Brundage and I'll find the other one right now, Dustin Stoltzfus. Oh, wow, amazing. Really good stuff there. And by the way, he weren't looking too great against Stoltzfus and had to, pull it off by taking the back standing in the third round. He has got great ability, has got great grappling, but I don't think for long enough to win a fight against Petrosian, who's very hard to finish and very composed. We move on. Up the card, Caio Borralho versus Abbas Magomedov. I'm going to go with Borralho here over Abbas. Again, Abbas Magomedov, man. I know it was Sean Strickland and he's now the champ, but I think there's something to be said about a situation where once you've gone past the first round and you absolutely gas, in the very next fight, if you don't get it done in the first round, are you going to absolutely gas again, thinking, last time I completely gassed in the second? And he really gassed and arguably quit in that fight. Was walking away from Strickland, not even looking at him, barely throwing anything back. Borralho has the grappling offense, which I think is going to stop Abbas from being able to be so dynamic on the feet with his kicks and his wild shots. And it's going to really gas him out a little bit more if he tries to stuff those takedowns, which I think he may be able to do. But Borralho is not 5'8". Found that out the wrong way when he made his debut. He is literally about 6'2". He's a big dude for the middleweight division. Huge, strong, powerful, great double leg entries, especially on a wild opponent. I reckon he's going to be able to get this one done. And he's younger, more improving, more experience in the UFC. Even though Abbas does have some big time experience at PFL. I mean, Borralho is he's getting himself more experience that he didn't have before. I'm not saying that he's more experienced than Abbas Magomedov, but that was a worry about Borralho. Now it feels like home to him in the UFC. Massively improving every fight. I reckon he's going to win. He choked out Mikhail Alexeychuk in his last fight impressively in that performance and had a decent time on the feet as well. He don't look too bad on the feet anymore, so I'm going to go with him beating Abbas Magomedov. Abbas Magomedov dangerous, but quitter. We move on. Up the card. Rodrigo Nascimento Ferreira versus Dontel Mays. I'm going to go with Rodrigo Nascimento Ferreira. I don't believe in Dontel Mays. I know he chinned Arlovski in his last fight, but I think Arlovski's had his last hurrah in his career. I didn't like watching him get held against a cage by Augusto Sakai and held against a cage by Hamdi Abdulwahab in moments as well. I know those two guys can grapple, but I just think that Rodrigo Nascimento Ferreira coming off wins against Ilir Latifi, who is a dangerous heavyweight that took Derrick Lewis himself to a split decision when he was in his prime. Tanner Bosa got a win against him by utilizing the grappling. I think the grappling is going to be the difference here, and I think that's where he's going to beat Dontel Mays. I like Rodrigo Nascimento Ferreira, and to be honest, I like his inside boxing a little bit more as well. His clinch work, his game up against the cage, and I don't see Dontel Mays being able to stop that after seeing how pathetic he looked against Augusto Sakai. So I'm going to go Rodrigo Nascimento Ferreira, getting this one done by a grueling 29-28 decision. We move on. Up the card, Gabriel Bonfim versus Nicolas Dalby. Nicolas Dalby's not bad, you know. He really isn't bad, and he really does confuse me because he's on a bit of a win streak right now. Muslim Salikov, Wale Alves, he beat Claudio Silva, but that is not a win that even means anything. Claudio Silva is testosterone-less. I like Ariel Hawani. Tim Means beat him in their fight in a very competitive decision. I reckon that Gabriel Bonfim's going to make quick work of Nicolas Dalby. Just on an athleticism standpoint, I think he's a lot better. I think he's a lot stronger. He's way bigger than Nicolas Dalby as well. There's going to be a size difference out there. And way more able to get a finish in the first round. Nicolas Dalby, to win a fight, needs to be perfect for 3 rounds. Bonfim needs to be perfect for a minute, and he's got you. That's what it seems like in Bonfim's career so far. I think he's very dangerous, 26 years old as well. Still got time to improve, and he's already 15-0. I reckon he gets this one done. Dominated Trevin Giles, who is a difficult opponent for most fighters on the best of days. Was difficult for Mohamed Morales. What was his name? Never mind, I'm thinking of the wrong person. But even still, Michael Morales was somewhat... No, he wasn't. I'm thinking of the absolute wrong person. But either way, Trevin Giles can be a tricky opponent for a lot of people that are somewhat decent. Roman Dolidze as well. You know what I mean? That's who I'm thinking of. Roman Dolidze. And Gabriel Bonfim just shut him up. Put him away. First round submission. Beat Mounir Lazzez, which again is not an easy test. Mounir Lazzez beat Ange Lusa, who I think is pretty good as well. So I'm going to go with Gabriel Bonfim getting himself a first round guillotine choke over Nicolas Dalby. I think he'll throw him around, wait for his opportunity, and latch up that choke again, his signature guillotine. We move on. Up the card, Jailton Almeida versus Derrick Lewis. Love Derrick Lewis. Really want Derrick Lewis to win. Don't want too many heavy grapplers in the heavyweight division. It ruins it. It just ruins it. And Jailton Almeida has the chance to ruin everything. Gotta go Jailton Almeida. Derrick Lewis seems to do well against grapplers that try and do like really athletic blast double legs, like Curtis Blades. Double leg takedowns, single leg takedowns. Fighters that work the clinch and stick to him, they get him down. Sergey Spivak, Jailton Almeida's one of them as well. Ilir Latifi did this. Blagoy Ivanov did this. If you're trying to shoot a blast double leg on Derrick Lewis, he's really strong hips, and he has a solid chance of stuffing him like he did against Curtis Blades. Against Jailton Almeida on short notice. I love that he's feeling himself. I love that Derrick Lewis got that win over Marcos Rogerio de Lima and thinks, I'm back. Don't think he's back. I think Jailton's going to get him down, drag him down, stay on him. Maybe Derrick Lewis gets back up a few times, but I think that's only going to lead to him gassing out even more. And I don't think Jailton Almeida's all that bad on the feet either. I think he's got pretty underrated boxing. So I'm going to go with Jailton Almeida winning this fight. Maybe stinging Lewis a bit on the feet early and showing him I'm not just going to keep shooting takedowns here. And then getting him in the clinch, shaking him around, toppling the fat guy over, and ending up on top position over Derrick Lewis. So yeah, I'm going to go Jailton Almeida, getting this one done via a TKO to ground and pound on a Derrick Lewis that just simply isn't really moving anymore. I don't think Lewis has got this one. And he's just getting older and older. 38 years of age now. soon to be 39 in February. Got to go Jailton Almeida, dragging him down and beating him out. Like and subscribe. Thank you for watching. Toodle pip. I'll see you later. Goodbye.